Claire Lomack,
Sorry.
Claire Lomack Phelps will be moderating the talk tonight. You can put your comments, or if you want to make comments or questions later, you can enter it into the chat. And thank you all for coming. Claire?
Thank you, Patty. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for a wonderful conversation tonight. Our two guests this evening are Chief Vincent Mann and Michaeline Picaro of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation. And I will start with information on Chief Mann. He is the Turtle Clan chief of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation, which encompasses Passaic and Sussex counties in New Jersey, as well as Warwick and surrounding areas in New York. Since 2008, Chief Mann has tirelessly worked to help his community survive and fight back in light of the Ford Motor Company's toxic dumping on the Ringwood Mines Superfund site. Okay, he's a former member of the Ringwood Mines Superfund site's Citizen Advisory Group. He recently co-founded the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm with Michaeline Picaro to create local jobs, but more importantly, to bring back food sovereignty to his clan. He works with many universities on projects, and he regularly lectures on environmental justice and the importance of indigenous knowledge. Chief Mann gives land acknowledgements across New Jersey and New York in honor of his ancestors and offers up prayers for humanity and for our natural world. Michaeline Picaro is a member of the Turtle Clan of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation as well. And she's recently organized the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. It's a new community garden space in northern New Jersey. She is a mother, an artist, a nurse, and a healer. Her nursing and holistic energy, healing, and art backgrounds have allowed her to continue her journey with natural medicine for healing and food foraging. Her work stems from early native medicinal teachings from her father, combined with spiritual teachings from being with nature from a very early age. These teachings became a way of life for her, including the daily connection of listening, watching, and practice of all that Mother Earth teaches. And we are very, very honored to have them with us this evening. And I will now turn over the program to Chief Vincent Mann.
Kiha Kolomosi, Ninja Shinzi, Kikai Man, Nunjiai, Lamawo, Wanjikil, Lamawo, Tikwa, Anishi Kishalamokwen, Elamilian Yonkwai Kishquik, Wak Coconut Aki, Wak Tenda, Wak Mbi, Wak Ilongo Mati, Wak Nimbu Mausawakanum, Anishik, Anishik, Anishik. How is everyone doing? My name is Chief Vincent Mann. I'm the Turtle Clan chief of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation. I thank you, Creator, for giving us this day, our Mother Earth, the fire and the water. Thank you for all of our relations, and most importantly, we thank you for our lives. And thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the Nanticoke Lenape Nation, Chief Yuri Ridgway, on the loss of Chief Mark Gould's wife, Miss Gail, and just to think about them and hold them in our hearts as we go forward from here. This topic of racism here in the state of New Jersey for its indigenous people goes back quite a long ways. Goes back, right after contact and comes forward until the late 1900s. The late 1800s into the 1900s, where the Ramapough and the Shinnecock and others, the Unkachog, we became the study of eugenics. And the study of eugenics became something very known around the world, clearly as a form of racism at its core. And the Ramapough people, our kids were separated from our families. They were put in a fictitious village, one that was created. Really, it was kind of like an industrial school, Letchworth Village. Some of you may know that name. The 1970s, Geraldo Rivera actually broke the story on that particular place. It became an insane asylum. But before it was that, it was there to strip our indigenous ways and thoughts and looks out of us and our culture. In 1923, Margaret Sanger, who is the founder of Planned Parenthood, and a consortium of other folks, came up with 18 different ways to deal with the unwanted people of the Ramapough Mountains, and written in black and white. The number one way was by a public lethal gas chamber. While that did not come to fruition, sterilizations did. They began on our people. The doctor that the young girls would go to see figured out their anatomy and figured out how to sterilize them. Many of you know what happened in the late 30s and early 40s. It's drilled into all of our people's, just 300 plus million Americans here and billions of people around the world, what took place in Germany. What began here on our people is literally what became used on our relatives, the Jewish people. We know that today as the Holocaust, but it was that system of eradication was actually founded here in the state of New Jersey. So we are Ramapough, and we are still here. In this photo, what you see on the top left is a lot of Ramapoughs. There are a few Mohawks in this group who came down from Akwesasne to celebrate the returning of from the Sloat's descendants of the land deed, which my great-grandfather, Chief Manus, was party to. And also other photos of who we are today. This slide shows you that as early as 1926, there was a book that was written, and it was called The Faith of a Collie. Most people would see this children's book and not even think twice, about offering that up to a child to read. But simply put, on page 3, it says, "These blue-eyed niggers, a queer blend of mixed races which kept their type intact for more than a century by intermarriage and isolation." Even though this was written in 1926, this is still the thoughts of many people here. I apologize for the dogs. They are not a collie. 1936, again, we have another writing, right? The origins of the Jackson Whites of the Ramapough Mountains. And then again, we also see in this article, whether albinos are numerous in the Ramapoughs because of persistent inbreeding or lack of copper sulfate. This right here is a short clip, which I'm going to play. It is not that old.
This is Jill. Another thing that goes on around here, there's people called the Jackson Whites. They were slaves that came up from the South and they intermarried with the white people up here. And this is so racist and Nazi in West Milford that they were called Jackson Whites, which is a derogatory term in Ringwood. And the people were forced away from the regular community here, you know, where people live, into what is called the Ringwood Mines area. And in fact, they raise their own chickens, and white police from Ringwood don't even go up there because they'll be killed and shot. The Ringwood Mine people hate whites so much, they have thrown white paper boys down the mines. I can't show you an example.
I just want to pause it right there for 1 second, because what you heard was that the Ramapough Jackson White people that live in the mine area threw newspaper boys into the mine shaft to show you how diabolic the thinking is in regards to us. Those 2 children that went down into Cannon Mine were not anybody other than 2 Ramapough Turtle Clan members who were teens. When they pulled one of them out, whose body was recovered and he was dead, he had looked like he had been beaten to death with a baseball bat. The other one's body was never recovered in the mine, and his remains still remain there to this day.
Of a mine hole where I go swimming, but they're beautiful. They're quite beautiful, the Ringwood mine holes, and they have waterfalls. My friend has a picture on her site. Maybe I'll guide you to it. But there's people up in the Ringwood Mine area. No one goes up there. They're so scared unless you're family. And I was a family member through my African-American husband. So I've been up there. In fact, I was with my girlfriend and she got gang raped by 17 Jackson Whites. Nobody touched me because I was a relative and my husband was African-American. He was a relative of the Mulligans, a big clan up there. They also they have, because they only intermarry amongst themselves, they're genetically faulty, and they're albinos that are born, and the albinos have to live in the Ringwood Mine caves because they can't come out into the light because their eyes are red and their skin is too light. It'll be damaged. It's a very interesting subject. You might want to look into the Ringwood Mine people and the Jackson Whites.
Now, I can't say enough. I need to go to the next slide. I'm not sure how to get there. I can't say enough about what you just heard. It is mind-boggling to me that in this modern time, we have another human being who has decided that we 1 second, sorry, that we are not sure what's going on there.
Just,
Yep.
well, if you can go back to the slide presentation and just go to the next slide and click on that. We always have a little technical difficulty, to be expected.
Absolutely.
We have a very understanding audience, so no worries, no pressure.
Okay.
Yeah, we are definitely not technically savvy.
Yeah, definitely not. Can you bring us back like you did before?
I just exit. That's it, right there. No.
Okay.
I mean, that's
We'll leave it on this. That way we can see. So so one of the things, let's just think about this, right? does anybody really believe that there are albino Ramapoughs with red eyes who have to live in the mines? That's just absolutely ludicrous. But what happens is that when humans, other humans, take the take their when other humans decide that they're going to project this about any community, whether you're Irish, whether you're African American, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're English, whether you're Australian, and projects these things outward, it is the strongest way that somebody outside of, doing what used to happen back in the 50s and 60s, their expression of racism. They are putting these words out there and hoping that they stick somewhere. So this is in 2010. It was in the New Yorker. The writers alluded to the movie Deliverance, speculated that the Manns had been cooking meth and shared stories about personal encounters with the freaking monkeys on Stag Hill, where it was rumored that martial law was in effect, with armed vigilantes driving around in pickup trucks. Yes, these people are known as the Jackson Whites, one posted. They are all inbreed lowlives. Those so-called Indians up there are nothing more than gypsies who think that they can do anything they want in the woods. Mixed emotions here between the happiness of one scumbag dead. These types of things are so numerous when it comes to the Ramapough, in particular, right? That you would be hard pressed to try to Google something to not find this kind of hatred. In 2013, right, Out of the Furnace came out. We had done so much work, promoting our culture, promoting our kids, educating our kids, educating other people, beginning to go to universities and public displays and all these things. And then out of nowhere comes Out of the Furnace. So Out of the Furnace was actually a script that was written by a barbershop guy, worked for his father. And he wrote this script and it wasn't called Out of the Furnace. It was actually called something else. And it was about people out in the Midwest. Had nothing to do with this place. Well, what is his name?
They wanted to know where he based this, where he got the idea for this movie. And that's what he said.
Right. But there's a famous actor out there named Leonardo DiCaprio, who actually bought this and then got together with Scott Cooper, and he wanted to actually play the villain in this movie, but they said that he wasn't going to be able to do it because he just didn't have that kind of an actor or whatever. So they made that person Woody Harrelson. In this one part here, it says, so there were Ramapoughs who actually were trying to sue this movie. And the judge determined that this wasn't about the Ramapoughs, that it had nothing to do with the Ramapoughs at all. Well, needless to say, Mr. Scott Cooper, who was out there doing interviews, sits here and says, that's why I chose that region, because we also don't see many films about Western Pennsylvania, or certainly where Woody Harrelson's character is from, which is the Ramapough Mountains of New Jersey. They named him Harlan DeGroat, right? They talk about the Ramapough Mountains. They even had in the original release where it said, the person who was playing the Jackson White, right? This is in 2013, and how they were able to get away with saying that this was not directly related to us is absolutely insane.
And if anybody's seen the movie, it's about these you know, inbreds, which they refer to in this movie quite often, in the Ramapough Mountains, that do what they please. They cook meth, they bare knuckle fight. They're pretty much scumbags and they're awful people. And right down here, it talks about the character that Woody plays, which is Harlan DeGroat, right? Worked very hard on crafting the evil that would reside in him. He admittedly said that, well, I can't read that part.
And admittedly, Woody said it was the part that he was most ready to shed when he finished shooting. If you know Woody, you know he's a thoughtful and kind and really intelligent and sweet man. But to see him play that type of evil is a testament to his abilities as an actor.
So they knew about the place. They knew about the people because, or
well, they did, because he actually, Scott Cooper actually went to school in New York City.
Yeah.
And in the article that we had found said that, you know, oh, he was sitting in New York City looking over at the Ramapough Mountains, and he had always heard these stories. And yet in the courtroom, the judge was like, well, yeah, you know, it's not, you're right, it's not that, but far from it.
And not realizing the harm that it causes people in their everyday lives. These are residuals that people still talk about, that people still kind of believe in, this lore, this folklore that surrounds the, you know, Jackson Whites or the inbreds up there on the mountain, you know.
So out of the furnace into the reality of Ramapough families. Specifically, the character played by Woody Harrelson, portrayed as an inbred psychopath who deals hard drugs from a secluded community in New Jersey's Ramapough Mountains, is so obviously inspired by the people who actually live in New Jersey's Ramapough Mountains that you wonder if anyone involved with the film, from Cooper to Relativity Media, ever thought to consult a lawyer. You hope that they bought E&O insurance. It would be one thing if Harrelson's ruthless, vicious crime boss was like Vito Corleone, merely inspired by, say, Carlo Gambino, but Harrelson's character is named Harlan DeGroat. DeGroat being one of the chief names in a community that now refers to itself as the Ramapough Indians, but has for decades been the subject of tall tales, fearful rumors, and no shortage of outright bias.
That's another article that was written on behalf of us.
And so we have this one in here, and this is connected to our support of Standing Rock on our ceremonial land, our land in which we pray, our land in which we were given the right back to pray openly in 1978. That is not so long ago, right? And while we were there praying, the town of Mahwah and the fine people from the Polo Club decided that they were going to get together and that they were going to do anything and everything possible to prevent us from going on our land. If more than one Ramapough was on the land together, now I don't know how they would know that it was both people were Ramapoughs, but if they deemed that two people from the Ramapoughs were on that land, then we would be fined $11,000. Now, we were fined $11,000 for, I forget how many months.
I thought it was $2,000 a day for having prayer stones and a teepee on there.
There was a teepee on there. They said we couldn't have that. We had prayer stones, which we would bring stones and offer up prayers and leave them on an altar, right? Just like our ancestors have done for thousands of years. But they were up to $1.5 million. Right? And believe it or not, it was Donald Trump's administration who actually cleared the way, and the Justice Department of the federal government came to our land, walked on our land with us. And when I spoke these words about what I just shared with you about two Ramapoughs on that land, he stopped walking and looked at me and goes, "Chief Man, that can't be serious. You can't be serious." I'm like, if you were a Ramapough, we'd find out really quick. And so they actually cleared the way for our tribal community to pursue the town of Mahwah for our religious freedom. We settled with Mahwah. That was because of us and the town of Mahwah which is Mawa Way, which is the place where people gather, still carries one of our words as its name. And because it's a municipality, it only made sense for us to be able to be the bigger people, right? And settle this out of court. The other half of those people, which is the Polo Club, they have ridiculed our people, called them gypsies, elders on the land. You know, there's been cops were called and all these things. Here's somebody's famous little magazine in the state of New Jersey. And, you know, it's not enough that they did things like this once, but they continually do things like this. David Cohen, which we don't have in here as a slide, but, you know, David Cohen, you know, claims that he knows the origins of the Jackson Whites, right? The Ramapough Mountain people. And yet he's never come forward with that information, right? And people like, let's see, what's his name in Kraft. So Kraft, the father, who is no longer with us physically, actually wrote a letter to the BIA refuting David Cohen's claims, you know, but yet he is someone who is actively out there trying to deny not just the Ramapoughs, right, but all the indigenous people in the state of New Jersey, even to the Lumbee, right? There's 50,000 Lumbees, right? And it's just amazing. There was the state of New Jersey did the Historical Society of New Jersey did a presentation, allowed us to do a presentation. In that presentation, David Cohen started firing off these questions. I responded to these questions with that, you know, knowing that he comes from his ancestors were slaughtered. They were burned to death. They were ripped apart, right? By the Nazis. And I explained that how could someone who knows their history like that, who is tied to us because of what was proposed in 1923, right? That happened to his family. And then he tried to claim that I was using anti-Semitic words. And so the state of New Jersey decided that they needed to call me, and they did. And when I explained what I just said, their mouths were wide open and they were like, oh my God, Chief Mann, you just let us know what you want to do. And I said, well, you need to do what you promised. And what you promised was that you were going to allow this recording to be out for the world to see. And so they did. And I applaud them for that. All right. Time to listen here, folks. Inbred mountain folk from New Jersey.
Hey, inbred mountain folk from Jersey. Dirt ain't over until the snakes are back in the bag, you know. What are they doing?
Up in the Ramapough,
they got
fights.
Yeah, let's go fight up in Jersey. Up in the Ramapoughs, they got fights.
Don't talk to me like that.
This is our last one. And excuse the language, please.
You fuck with these inbreds, you can call them back if you're lucky.
So that is I apologize. We actually have 28 people who are part of this, and wait until you see what Michaeline has.
I don't know if we can show, but I just saved a baby bunny from my cat. That's what all that ruckus was out there. So I don't know if you can see him.
Oh.
Now, would a Jackson White ever think about doing something like that? Surely not a red-eyed albino who lives in a mine shaft, which is not possible. So, you know, we try and strive for, and it's really difficult, right, for us to express ourselves with our culture, right? I don't deny that I may have African-American blood. I don't deny that I may have Czechoslovakian blood. I don't deny that I may have Irish blood. I don't deny any of that, right? So if I don't deny any of those things, then what is wrong with Chief Mann standing up and saying that I am descended from Chief Manus, which I am, which is where our name comes from, and that we are the Munsee speaking people. And while we were treated differently for the last 400 and almost 399 years, is it? When the Dutch came to Manhattan as a colonizer next year. We have always been the kind, caring, loving, giving people that most people know me to represent to this day. Auntie Claire Garland, you know, and the rest of our relatives. You know, we don't go around telling everybody to get back on a boat, right? It's not that those thoughts don't cross some people's minds, but the reality of it is that, you know, just like the Kishalomokwane, the creator, the one who thought everything into existence, that sound of creation, right, is replicated in our rattle. That's why all babies, it doesn't matter what color they are, right? Doesn't matter what race they are, doesn't matter anything, boy or girl. But when that little baby is very colicky and won't go to sleep and nothing will soothe it, and you give it a rattle and you shake the rattle and the baby stops crying, it's because that baby is so close to the creator, Kishalomokwane, because it came from that universe into this universe, right? When they come through our mothers and then enter this world. And that is when those little babies have nothing, right? They only carry the knowledge of the creator. And it is the job of all human beings that come in contact with this little baby, whether it's a boy or a girl that comes into this world, right? To show it love, care for it, right? Feed it, keep it warm, right? That baby is showing its utmost humility at that point, right? Like, I can't do this without you, Mom. I can't do this without you, big human being, right? When those children begin to grow and become, you know, little toddlers and then adolescents, and then they become young adults, and then they become, you know, those people in the middle, like most of us, everyone on here, right? Those ones in that middle group, and they become elders, right? And our hope is, like with our original instructions, right, of wisdom, love, honor, respect, and humility. And we live our lives, you know, dedicated to those original teachings that have been passed down for thousands and thousands of years. You know, when I was growing up, you know, I went to the Good Shepherd in Ringwood, right? It's Episcopalian church. That's not my faith. You know, my faith is my culture. But I went there and I learned and I listened. And what I first heard about the Ten Commandments, right? When I first heard about the Ten Commandments, I was like in awe. I was like, wow, right? God, the creator, Allah, whichever you want to call him, gave us these things to which we should live by, right? And yet I don't know too many people who actually live by them. You know, and this is not about religion, but it has to do with it too, right? It has to do with about our belief system and what we learn, what we sit in front of a TV, and when we're 2 years old and we sit in front of that TV until we're 21 and all we see is racism, right? What do you think is going to happen, right? Our mind is going to have all of that in those little filing cabinets, and it's going to come out, and it's going to be a part of who I am, even though it's not truly who I am. right? I had a conversation with somebody and where our farm is, and I said to them, look, you tell us that we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, but you let those other farmers, right, who are not us, they can do anything. And the response came back to me was this: Chief Mann, well, I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying. It was, I don't consider myself a racist. And I went, huh? First of all, most people who are racist don't consider themselves to be racist. They just consider themselves to be from a dominant culture. There is no dominant cultures here in this world, right? The Creator made us all equal. No matter how, if you're an embryo or if you're 104 years old, like my auntie was allowed to be here. Doesn't matter if you're a squirrel, it doesn't matter if you're that rabbit, right? It is so important for us to remember that we are one of the most vulnerable species on this planet. And if we allow racism, if we allow the unteaching of those 10 commandments, if we allow those people who learned those other ways to be the ones who have the largest voice, right, then we'll all lose. We will all lose. And it just so happens to be that I'm not willing to be the one who has to bear that weight of allowing this kind of thing to continue. Not just for the indigenous people of the state of New Jersey, not just for the indigenous people of North and South America, around the world. And it doesn't even matter if you are not us, because absolutely 100% positively that we are all indigenous people, every one of us. That means we're all equal, right? That means that we need to depend on each other. If the power goes out, we need to be able to know that we can count on Liz, and Liz can count on Patricia. Patricia can count on Barbara. Barbara can count on John. Everyone can count on me. Nobody has come to help our people who are suffering for 54 years living in a federal Superfund site in Ringwood, New Jersey. Nobody. Not the federal government, not the town who hates us, right? Not the county, and not the state, at least not until recently. So Mikey and I decided that we were going to create Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm so that we can actually grow hemp at first, right? So that we can then raise money to hold people accountable for their actions to our people, just like you watched and read just now and heard. But that year, COVID came. So Mikey and I put in a small little garden so we can be reconnected to that soil of our ancestors. And Mikey and I delivered over 20,000 pounds of health supplies and PPE to our community from March all the way until November of that year, taking our own personal money, about $10,000 worth, renting U-Haul trucks and vans to make sure we could deliver it to everybody. At the end of that, we decided that what we needed to do was to grow hemp, right? But we needed to take our farm and make our farm a place that we grow highly medicinal food so that we can try to help our own community by, growing those highly medicinal valued foods. So like red cabbage compared to green cabbage, right? There's no comparison, and so we decided to do that. And then, at that point, NYU, we were involved with them. We still are. That's going on 10-year relationship with NYU Environmental Medicine. They have helped us to secure a grant for 5 years, which takes the weight off of Michaeline and myself as far as having to come up with all the money to pay for those things that we need to do. This farm is also a prototype that can be copied and utilized anywhere. We practice, growing some traditional and cultural ways, but we also realize that there is a need for us to grow and propagate much food in order to realize food sovereignty, right? We are involved with the state of New Jersey right now and Rutgers, and we're running a pilot program that hopefully will start this year at Whittingham Preserve, which is 40 acres of fish and wildlife land, which is farmland. And we're going to convert that not to organic, because organic has been co-opted from our ancestors, right? It wasn't, and I hope nobody on here takes offense to this, but it was not the French lady in Connecticut, right, who took brown leaves and sticks and greens and made mounds. Those were Muncie speaking people, right? At least here. And so I kind of tend to stay away from the word organic and just say naturally grown or Native American grown. So I'm going to stop right there and offer, whoever has any question, I am more than willing and honored to be able to answer them. Thank you.
Very good.
Chief Mann, could I just ask you to talk a little bit about the Ford dumping on land? Because that's something that everybody in the audience knows about.
Sure. So in 1956, which just this certain part just came to light, actually. Imagine all that long ago, but just coming to light, right? So in 1956, the federal government actually decided that they had manufacturing corporations that were in strategic areas. When they say strategic, it wasn't like strategic for the benefit of the United States. It was actually in an area where Russia or China or whoever could send a missile over and blow it up, right? So they wanted to move it away from there, for one. Ford, on the other hand, down in Edison, decided that they needed a bigger paint oven. So in between that time, Ford actually created electroplating, right? So what they did basically was they took paint that did not have metals in it, right? So if you look at the old cars, you don't see no metal specks or nothing like that in them, right? You just see like just a black or blue or gray or white, right? And then they decided, so they were trying to figure out a way in which to make paint go where the human being could not get underneath the car to paint all the parts. So they created electroplating. General Motors and Dodge and all the rest of them had to buy that technology from Ford. But what happened was that by adding, and this is also DuPont, right? And by adding the metals to the paint, they would then charge the vehicle, right? Positive or negative, and the paint would actually suck to the car. So that guy who was sitting there spraying the paint didn't even really have to do anything but just spray the paint, right? By the way, every single person who worked in those spray paint booths all died of cancer. Right? Mm-hmm. Ford has refused to release those documents to the DEC of New York with the health records. And I don't know how Ford can deny a state, access to them, but they did die from exposure. So Ford moved its plant to Ringwood in 1956. It became the largest automobile manufacturing plant in North America, if not the world. It sat in the very place where our long homes were. Mm-hmm. Ford would have had to have seen, their land agent, even back then, right, would have had to have seen that map, because that map was actually on animal skin that myself and Steve Burton fought to get protected. But it showed our longhouses there, right? Mahwah is Mahwah Way. It's the place where people gather, right, in the fall. And so Ford started generating cars. A lot of Ramapoughs actually worked for Ford. A lot of our neighbors worked for Ford. And Ford decided that they were going to buy 900 acres in Ringwood, New Jersey. They created a subsidiary company named Ringwood Realty, and Ringwood Realty bought the 900 acres. Their intention was to create a $50 million self-contained executive housing community for their executives who were working for Ford in the Mahwah plant. Our people fought against that removal The town of Ringwood, and this is all written documents, the town of Ringwood would have received $1 million a year in tax money from it. That triggers, oh, we even hate you even more for who you are, right? Coming from the municipality. And that's just the plain, simple truth, right? They can deny it all they want, but all you have to do is look at the documents, right? One of the mayors of the town of Ringwood in 1969 wrote a letter to Henry Ford, the grandson, in Dearborn, and said, Mr. Ford, I, the mayor and the council of the town of Ringwood, New Jersey, are requesting that you bring and dispose of all the industrial waste from the Ford Motor Plant in that community. And Ford, so when they lost the right to, in 1964, when they lost the right to remove 1,100 souls from there, people who are connected to the people who are in the very same spot that Peter Hasenclever wrote in 1764 back to his wife after the Treaty of Easton, right? Because people want to say the Treaty of Easton was a removal document, which it wasn't. So when Peter Hasenclever wrote that he came across those Indians living in dome-shaped hovels, right? Those were our wigwams. We used bark to cover them. That was one of the rights that we retained in the Treaty of Easton, strip bark from trees. And so 1964, Ringwood Realty lost the right to build this executive community. Ford almost immediately within months started to dump the toxic paint sludge from the automobile manufacturing plant. And that is after, I don't know if anybody on here ever drove past the Ford building when it was there, but in front of the building, all the way around it, actually, they had these gigantic troughs that went around the whole building. They literally filled that up all the way around. And when it got full, the next thing they started to do is throwing it over the fence, which went into New York State and another Ramapough Clan housing area, right? And then what they started to do, when they lost the right to do that, within months, they started dumping it on the ground and in the mines in Ringwood. We owned our own water, which was amazing to even think that we still retain the rights to the water in Ringwood, right, at that time. And so the dumping started going into the mine shafts, right? Peter's mine is 2,400 feet deep. It's 17 levels. It's hundreds of miles under there. It's less than a mile from the Wanakee Reservoir. Park Brook leaves the Superfund site at Peter's mine. It goes through the O'Connor disposal area. It goes through a swamp that has not yet ever been tested or cleaned by the federal government, not even listed as an area of concern. It goes from there over to Sally's Pond at Ringwood State Park, where there is not one sign that says, do not eat the fish, do not drink the water, do not touch the water, do not swim because. And yet they even stock trout in there in the spring for people to catch fish. And when it leaves there, it goes over the dam, it becomes the Ringwood River, and that flows, guess what? Right into the Wanakee Reservoir. That feeds 1/3 the population of the state of New Jersey, which is the most populous state in this country. 1/3 the people rely on just the Wanakee Reservoir. That is mind-boggling. So people want to have a discussion about why Newark has the lead in the service lines is leaching. And they said, oh, well, it's just old. Excuse my language, but bullshit. It's not just old. All you had to do is look to Flint, Michigan. They had no problem with their lead service lines until somebody decided that they were going to flip the switch and give the toxic water to the people living in the city and give the good water to the people who are more affluent. Mm-hmm. And when that toxic water started entering the pipes, it began to leach the lead from the pipes. What we have in Newark, and they're going to find out, and I've been very vocal about this because those people right there right now, that's an act of racism too, right? They're trying to say that it's because of the pipes, so they changed the lead pipes, but now all of a sudden they're learning that they still have problem with their water. Mm-hmm. And even the mayor Ross Baraka said the very first day it hit Channel 12 News, on the bottom of the screen, it said, the lead is not coming from the pipe.
Wow.
Right? And then when I got home, it was removed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what then took place was that our people started falling like flies. There was actually a certain time when we actually had a funeral every single day of the week, Monday to Sunday. There is, what kind of community do you know in the United States that goes through something like that, right? On top of it, so Sadie, so we have this woman in that film, right? And she's making all these remarks about albinoism and inbred and this, that, and the other thing. Well, how come she's not saying about the King and Queen of England? How come she's not saying about that, about any royalty families across the ocean, right? Kind of bizarre how, you know, they don't want to talk about that, but they want to talk about indigenous people. Well, in order for us to stay a people, in order for us to you know, prosper and to be many, right? Again, right? We're not going to necessarily go and marry outside of the tribe all the time. And yes, it does happen. And yes, it has happened. But it wasn't our people who went searching out those other people, right? The Irish were indentured slaves, right? The German Tories, they were forced to fight. They were slaved, right? The African Americans, obviously we know that story, right? But it's not the only story. Everybody who has come here that was not a wealthy person was enslaved by somebody else. And they were forced to do the things that they wanted them to do, even to our ancestors. So when those people got away, when they escaped, right, their captors, they went to the one place that there were still people who were not like those people, and those people happen to be the indigenous people of New Jersey. It's not just here. Go to Connecticut, go to Massachusetts, go to New York State, go to Maine, go to Vermont, go to New Hampshire, go to Canada, go to Florida, right? There's a big misconception that we're supposed to all be wearing headdresses, right? That's not what we wear, right? The other part of that is that, you know what, we have had to have dealt with the influx of people from Europe, right, for hundreds of years before that even made it past the Mississippi River. Of course, we're going to look different. We already did, right? But there is no justification in any law that has ever been written, whether it's a blue law, man's law, or any law, or any other thing that justifies the amount of racism that occurs here today in the state of New Jersey. Everything from the Ford lawsuit, everything from the state lawsuit for us being recognized officially, right? Everything from these movies that are happening, the people who want to speak out against us. Why? And it's only because when we start to elevate ourselves up like this, right, then everybody wants to fire away. And two people sitting here right next to each other are the people who everybody wants to fire shots at right now, from inside, from outside, from Oklahoma, from Canada, anywhere, right? Because we're so determined to not allow racism, to not allow history, right, to be written and told by people who choose to see it in a different way. The reality of it is that the indigenous people of New Jersey should be applauded, and their ancestors should be applauded for their persistence and survival against all odds, against every single thing that has ever happened. If we were such savages, the first Dutch fur traders would have never left here. They would have never went back to Europe and explained how beautiful this place was.
They would have never learned our language, which they put on their maps.
Which they had to do.
Yeah.
If we were those people. But we're not. We're not the people who are born of hatred. No one is. Everybody ever look at a baby and just say, you know what, I just hate you to death. And the baby just be a second old. Nobody. And I don't care what color they are. Not one. And it's time that we, the state of New Jersey, right, and all its residents, everybody, starts to realize that, you know, we're going to be progressive about the environment, just like California is, right? So you have California on the West Coast that's really super progressive, right? And then here on the East Coast, you got New Jersey. Well, even in the laws that the state of New Jersey is passing right now, even though I applaud them, they are still filled with racial injustice. Because not one of those laws that have been created, not even the one that Chris Christie created because of his friend's gay son who killed himself. I applaud him for passing that law. But why does that law not, that anti-bullying law, which is the strongest one in the country, why does it not pertain to us? Well, Chief Mann, we're just trying to treat everybody the same. No, you're not. Don't treat me the same. I don't want to be treated the same. I want you to continue to treat me differently. Because when you start to treat me the same as everybody else, that's another form of injustice. Our ancestors didn't go through what they went through. Our grandmothers and aunties and everybody didn't hide and go and pray in the bottom of churches just so that we can be treated like everybody else. They didn't do it for that reason. They did it so that our culture would survive. And for that, we should not be ridiculed. We should not be having to have racism forced down our throat like it's a cup of coffee. And nobody else should, for that matter, either.
So true.
So you opened up a can of worms.
Yeah, Chief Mann, we told everyone in our last program, tonight's program would be much more emotional. I will tell you one thing, we try not to be political, but in all the programs we ever had, this is the only program that anything was good ever really nicely said about President Trump. Thank you for that.
I'm not a politician. I'm the seventh-time great-grandson of Chief Manus.
Yes.
Yes.
That was an interesting move on his part. It was. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We do have something in our chat.
Yep.
Claire, do you want to just say a couple of the things and then we can go back?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much for those profound words. It is very emotional. It is very emotional. I will list some of the things that and questions that people have had in the chat. Mary Faith says, this is eye-opening for me as I grew up in Wayne and had friends from Kinnelon. Some of these friends whispered about the Jackson Whites, and it's nice to know the truth. And I personally will say the same thing because I have some distant cousins that talked about the Jackson Whites that was mentioned in some of our family conversations. And these cousins actually, one of her aunts lived in Warwick, New York for a long time. She talked about Hillburn, New York to me. And they also, their mother and father had a home up in Greenwood Lake. So some of those areas, you know.
You're my family?
I'm sorry?
So you're my family?
I believe that I am. I believe that I am because after tonight's program, I'm going to go and call her and see if she can remember some of the things because we have had these conversations because, well, my grandmother was born and raised in Brooklyn and her mother and grandmother, they were born, I believe, up in that area, up in Warwick, and they talked about that. You know how you just hear snippets of conversations through family? So this gives me the impetus to do some research on this. It really
54 and a half years, I do.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. And the next comment, HBO.
So thank you for that comment, by the way.
You're very, very welcome. And thank you for all the clarity. The HBO documentary Man versus Ford covers what you talked about in great detail. Teresa Vega also mentions that the same documentary and American Native, which is on Amazon Prime,
There she is.
are two great documentaries to watch that are on the Ramapough Lunaape. And Patty is asking, can the speakers talk about your spiritual and cultural practices? And Kathy is asking, how can the average New Jersey citizen support you and your people?
Oh, So the first part of that, our spirituality and our culture, is one of the most beautiful things in the world. I mean, you know, not that long ago, there was in Canada, when it came out about the boarding schools, right? And they started to find the remains. One of our relatives up there, she was standing on the steps to one of those buildings, burning sage. And she was arrested, thrown to the ground. Now, when you go to the Catholic Church and the bishop walks down the aisle and is swinging that chalice and that incense is burning, it is doing the same exact thing. Religion is born in out of spirituality, right? Spirituality really just frees you from being bound. You know, religion is beautiful, right? But the religion has been co-opted. Religion has been used as a tool. Spirituality is not used as a tool, right? It is about being connected and understanding your whole world, your natural environment, each other. We just had a relative that showed up at our farm just before we were going to go and eat, but we didn't get to go and eat because they showed up at the farm and it was too late for us to go. But she walked into the greenhouse and she goes, you know, Chief Man, I just have to tell you, because she went in there, I wasn't with her. And when I walked in there with her, she was like, when I walked in here, those plants just grabbed me and wrapped their arms around me. That's spirituality. On the religion side, right, you would be at church and you would hear a story that was created by a human, right, to try to make it so you could understand what something took place 1,000 years, 1,200 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And so the difference would be that if at the Church of the Good Shepherd, right, I'll just use our church, right? So at the Church of the Good Shepherd, we practice both, right? We practice, you know, religion, right? And we practice our culture. The fact is that they're so intertwined, right? There really is no difference, right? When you take away, you know, well, this guy went over the mountain and this guy killed his brother and this guy was, you know, took his brother's wife and all that, doesn't it tell us all in the 10 Commandments, right? Doesn't that tell everybody how just to live their life as a good human being, as a good spirit, right? So, you know, for us, for spirituality, it's like we're so connected to our natural world, and our natural world means all of you. It means the trees, it means the stones have a spirit, right? The water is actually alive. It needs rights, right? It needs to be protected for all human beings, not just for me, right? And so our culture and our spirituality is not separate, right? It is one, right? When you start to separate those things out, right, that's colonization, you know, for lack of a better word, right? Because before that grabbed hold and before that took place, you know, we were all clanspeople, right? We lived in small family units that, you know, traveled the whole entire world, right? And then one day we figured out how to create a boat and we paddled, right? You know, how else does a spear point that is made out of an orange type stone that is only found in California end up on our mountain, right? That's because of trade, and those trade routes are still there. Michaeline's working on our original, you know, our original trail systems. Our house where we are right now is on a part of the Minnesink Trail, right? She's out there trying to protect our ceremonial stone landscape, which we still do. We come up on, we try to protect, we pray at them, we leave offerings at them. So I don't know if I answered the whole thing, but that was that one part. And the second part was?
The second part was how can the average New Jersey citizen support you and your people?
You know, I think that, you know, asking us to participate in events, right? Asking us to speak to the youth, asking us to speak to the elders, you know, speaking our truth, right? It's that time now where we have to stand up and speak our truth. And if we're not willing to stand up and speak our truth, like, I'm not a politician. When people call me an activist, I lose my mind, right? I'm none of those things. I'm just a Native American who sees a need to correct the wrong, right? To tell the truth, to show how everything that we do is mutually beneficial to each other and our planet, because we're not separate from it. You know, our biggest goal, is to make sure that everyone understands that when people talk about climate change, when people talk about racism, when people talk about environmental justice or injustice, right? When we talk about all those things, it's really about making it so that humans do not become the next species of millions who have gone extinct. You know, we don't want to see that. And the only way that we can prevent that from happening is by being willing to come on forums like this to speak our truth. And, you know, for that, I want to say that it's truly an honor for me and Michaeline as well.
Well, very good. Thank you so much. How are things going on the medicinal farm?
Beautiful. And so that would lead back to that last question, and how people can help is that you guys can all come on the weekends up to our farm in Andover, New Jersey.
Okay.
You can come and just be, because it is that kind of a place, or you can come and gather vegetables when they're ready. You can come and
There's always waiting.
help.
Right. Come to work. That's good.
Well, you know, we don't call it work. As soon as we call it work, we're all done.
Okay.
I'm going to come down there and work in the library.
Oh,
That'd be great too.
Trust me, you don't want to say that to me. When people walk in the library and say, oh, I just retired, I'm thinking of volunteering. Well, everything changes in their life after they say that. One thing I did want to ask you, healthcare is, I think most people would agree, very broken in this country. And I would, you know, just like to maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the healthcare as far as.
So health, if everybody is agreeable to that, healthcare is broken in this country, right? If you can agree to that, then you can only imagine what healthcare is for us. Right? I mean, let's honestly, let's face it, right? Native Americans are just entering our civil rights movement, right? Can you imagine that human beings actually have to basically go to the streets to say, you know, where's our healthcare? Where's our, you know, mental care? Where's our all this stuff, right? And we're just getting to that point. I mean, I didn't lie before when I told you that it was 1978 when we were given the right back to openly pray. 1978.
Wow.
That's insane. And I think it wasn't until 1990 until we were actually legal to start practicing our languages. You know, I mean, that's really crazy, you know? And so, oh, where did you guys go? Oh, there you are.
Oh, we're here.
Yeah, you disappeared on my screen because I was fidgeting. I'm sorry, I got a little off base there with your question.
Well, the important thing is we see you.
I appreciate that.
Someone else has a question. Exactly where in Andover is the farm? Is the
so if
I guess the address or the
so the address to our farm is 290 Route 206, Andover, New Jersey.
Newton.
Oh, it's Newton?
Newton, New Jersey.
Well, it's one of those towns. I was
Right.
telling you where it really is.
So
Yeah.
here's the thing. It really is located in Andover, but our mailing address is Newton. So Newton.
And if you would like to patronage our store, it comes before the farm, and that is 692
Route 206.
Andover.
Okay.
Newton.
They'll both get you there. I also would like to offer up for everyone else who wants to go just a step further after we're not here. You could always Google Chief Vincent Mann, and you'll be shocked like I am when I do that, because I'm like, holy smokes, I was there. Right.
Well, when you Google you're like a celebrity.
Nah, not a celebrity. I'm what you call the sacrifice. Right.
Okay.
So I and Michaeline sacrifice ourselves for the betterment and benefit of everyone else, and that includes the citizens of the state of New Jersey. So yeah, that'll bring you to our store, which has some very lovely things in there that Michaeline has actually made herself.
Okay. Well, that warrants a good trip up there.
It's one of the most healing things ever. I mean, it just to be, like we have a strawberry patch with ever bearing strawberries, and we don't sell strawberries, but when you show up and you eat those strawberries, I swear to you, it is, the creator said at Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm, even though they're not going to pay attention to this, to the sacred fruit, right? The strawberry, right? That I'm going to make those strawberries so sweet. It will be as if I took a sugar cane and broke it down to make sugar and dumped it on it before the person ate it. That literally is how sweet those strawberries are. It's the craziest thing ever. Right? That's the heartberry, right? You can see, and also at the farm, you can also see our turtle effigy that we made, right? We made a ceremonial stone landscape, and it's a turtle that's coming out of the ground. It's pretty big in our medicine garden that we're creating. And where I was going before, if you share, maybe you can share it in the chat, Ramapough .org. Ramapough.org. And that is our nonprofit, Ramapough Culture and Land Foundation. And when you go on there, you can go into more in depth about our history, who we are. People like to say that, there was never a tribe named the Ramapoughs. That's the funniest thing in the world, right? Because when our grandfather, going all the way back, Chief Katona, was on the landing, and he said, I, Chief Katona, am the sachem of all Ramapough Indians, right? And then somebody else wanted to give his grandfather name his where he was living as a tribe, right? The Wickagissiks. There was no such thing, right? We were just Lunaape, right? Original humans, and those names that were given to us were actually the names of the places which we resided in, right? So they were the names of our towns, of our cities, right? Of our little villages or big villages. So if you go on there, you'll see that there's maps on there, and then there is a whole thing on environmental justice, where you can actually read Jan Barry's work, right? Jan Barry Crum, when he was at the Record, it was an award-winning series. He won awards on the series himself. And then when the Toxic Legacy, but when the newspaper was bought by the Daily News, this is an unbelievable thing. When the newspaper, the Record, right, when they were bought by the Daily News, they almost immediately tried to scrub the internet of everything to do with Toxic Legacy. So who are those people connected to? You can always say one thing. I mean, and I know this is not a political thing, but even to our representative here in the North is Josh Gottheimer. Josh Gottheimer actually worked for Ford Motor Corporation on trying to make their, how do you say that? Their appearance, their public relations, right? And it's all going on, man versus Ford, you know. But then he became our congressional person, and then he became friends with the people in the town, the town council of Ringwood. And it's like, how can you go to them and ask them for help? No matter which way you turn, you're sitting in the room with the people who are responsible for what happened. How do you get away from that? It's just unbelievable. So the only way to break free of that, right? The only way to rip the chains off, right, is by standing up, sacrificing, your time and your life for what you believe in, right? And that is, we believe in humanity. There's still hope.
Thank you so much. Another question. Christine is asking, does your community offer language classes for the young people?
So this past year, we lost our language teacher earlier in the year. She passed away. Her name was Karen Moscow. She was from the Muncie Delaware Nation in Canada. But
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. It was a loss for everyone, really. And then, so Mikey and I went out to Stockbridge, Wisconsin, back in 2015 for the first gathering of Lenape people, and I can imagine 400 and something years. And while we were out there, myself and my brother Squirt out there adopted each other, and his daughter, one of his daughter, Nicole Picaro, and her partner now reside out here at our farm. We created a space for them to be. She is our language teacher, and she has been doing language classes on Wednesday evening at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Ringwood. We're going to be making a really big effort to make it on Zoom, so that more people can see and want to attend and help to support this effort, which is really a huge effort.
That's very good. That's awesome. That is awesome. That would be nice to see. Thank you.
Even at the farm. So what we did is MSU students, Mikey and I were a part of, and I'm not sure if the other communities in the state are. I'd imagine they were actually on helping to create a Native American minor study program at Montclair State University. Montclair State University has literally, I mean, they broke through the gate and are running free like the horses, right? With helping. And so Montclair State University and their students, professors and their students, have been coming to our farm, and they have actually been painting signs. So there are like field 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And it says that number, and then it has it in our language, and then it has it phonetically spelt, so anyone could try to learn it. Every vegetable that we have, if we don't have a word for it, we will have a word that will be as close to it as possible. But that will be also done that way too, so that when people come to the farm, they're able to actually, feel like they're actually a part of the farm, and they should, and they should, and the language, because the Dutch fur traders, right? They took the time to actually learn our language, right? It was when people started coming by the masses, right? And they weren't so friendly. This is 300 million Americans living a life of I, me, and mine instead of we, ours, and us, right? So had they taken the time to learn our language, do you know how different this world would be? It would be so different, because that language communication barrier, right, that existed created fear, right? So even back in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, our people in Ringwood were still speaking Jersey Dutch. What did that create? It sparked fear. And why? Because they didn't understand it, right? You know, in southern New Jersey, right, the Unami speaking people, right, they spoke Pidgin Delaware. Again, you know, if you didn't understand that, then you feared it, right?
Right.
And you could say this is the truth, right? If you walk into a restaurant somewhere, or you're standing around somewhere and you don't speak Spanish, and people are sitting there looking at you and speaking in Spanish, you're going to assume that they're saying something about you in Spanish that they don't want you to know. And so you inadvertently, right, because of the way we've been taught, are going to feel uneasy about that, right? It's the same exact thing. It doesn't matter if it was 400 years ago. It's the same exact thing that happens today, right? And that in itself, right, creates misunderstanding. It creates mistrust, right? And it creates racism. Plain and simple. I could go on for hours. You got...
we want you to have dinner. We normally end around 8:30, but if I could just ask if anybody else has questions before we do close, because this has been a really unbelievable program, and we thank you so very much.
And I so apologize for not being able to make my commitment earlier, our commitment, when we had been planned before. But I, you know, honestly, I mean, Mikey and I go around the clock.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not always a good thing. And
Wow.
I'm starting to understand that we're supposed to look at her, look at me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to go like this too.
I'm just waiting.
Well,
I would just
so
like
much.
to say, in addition to thank you so much, and we're really glad that you were finally able to join us. I just want to say that this is such. I hope you understand what a great service this is to everybody here on the program, and as well as the entire community, in terms of just announcing your presence and telling your story. And I hope that everybody here will take these stories to people and remind them that our Native peoples are still here. Thank you so much.
And this was recorded. So, for those that weren't able to be with us tonight, we certainly hope we're able to share this with many more people. And please continue to share with me when you're doing things. If we can share Zoom links through our website, we would be really, really honored to be a part of what you're doing. So we can't thank you enough for tonight. It truly has been an honor to have you with us. And we wouldn't have tonight if we had done it a couple years ago. So we're really, really pleased you took the time to be with us.
Yes. Thank you again.
And Teresa Vega says it's nice seeing her cousins.
That's correct.
It is.
And Claire
Hey, Claire.
And Claire Garland.
Special thanks to Claire Garland for connecting us. It really is about the connections. Claire has been a great, great help of our Let's Talk About Race committee, and she got us connected with you, Mickey, and I really thank all of you. Thank you very, very much. Thanks to our audience for being here.
And thanks to Rick Gefkin for putting Teresa and me together.
Yes, that is true.
We come
small
from
world.
the same
Okay.
Surly family in New York.
That's great.
Yeah.
Everybody is so moved and very thankful in the chat for the conversation tonight. Once again, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Please go have a good dinner.
We have to find the bunny rabbit now.
Oh, no.
Oh. She's not getting any sleep tonight.
Okay. Well, I hope that the bunny is okay.
I actually got to go put the chickens away. So
take care.
Have a wonderful evening. And we will see you at the farm.
Absolutely.
Thank you
again. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Lepitchkanawa Lomwa.